everyone. So, welcome to Made in India, Made for the World session. I'm Nirmal Jovial, Senior Correspondent at The Week. So, The Week Health has a special series on health tech companies that are that are creating innovative solutions for India and the world. So, a common thread we see when talking to the founders of the healthcare companies is that their passion for using technology to directly impact people's lives. So today we have four amazing health tech innovators here. Mr. Venkat Subramanian Narayanan, co-founder of Pepis Technologies. Ms. Padmini Janagi, founder of Mind and Mom. Mr. Arindam Sen, founder of HeartNet. And Dr. Karthik Ramesh, director of Dr. Hiramat Hospitals and Chief Strategic Officer of Cardio Bionic and co-founder Eminence E Global. Welcome to you all. So our session is 30 minutes long and we'll have rounds of questions for each of you. Please try to keep your answers brief so we can cover more ground. So Mr. Venkat, my first question is to you. Traditionally, drug development cycles took 10 to 15 years to complete. But your firm is an example of how AI is changing that domain. But you were someone who were concentrated on a purely IT domain of system architecture and software development. So how did you become a health tech entrepreneur focused on promising solutions in drug development, especially for many rare diseases offering hope to thousands of people?
First of all, yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for this inviting us here and this great opportunity. So, as you said, Pepis is an AI-powered preclinical drug discovery company. And I passed out of IIT Delhi and I was doing software for more than 20 plus years before we started Pepis. Completely in a different domain, right? From consumer electronics to drug design. And this all happened with the backstory of me meeting my co-founder, Sridhar Narayanan, who was heading AstraZeneca research at that time. And he happened to be a parent in the same school that my son went to. So we both met at parent-teacher meetings. And we were discussing technology and one led to the other. And the problem that he introduced really looked very interesting for us. As in, when I say us, it was another team of two of my colleagues who were doing software engineering. And we were working in AI, trying to cure devices. And that is when Sridhar said, why don't you start curing humans instead of devices? And one led to the other. And here we are 5 years later with some great work that we have done with some molecules going towards the clinic. So,
can you just tell us a little bit about the kind of work you are doing on this rare diseases area?
So particularly, one thing that we see is that the pattern is the big pharma typically is very interested in problems which have a lot of scale and where they can, monetize a lot. Whereas rare diseases, which eventually are very smaller, it affects 1 in 4,000 people, but in a population like India, it could be 5 lakh kids being affected. Most of them are genetic diseases, 5 lakh kids being affected by such a disease. And there is not much work being done across the world on this one. It's only in the academic labs that work gets done or parent groups trying to move research organizations to do work. And we were fortunate to get in touch with a few of these parent groups and research organizations, which led us to work on rare diseases. And we are really happy to be working in that domain, which is very fulfilling, number one. And in these rare diseases, the problem to start work on these rare diseases, very little is known on them. And so having this association with the parent groups and the researchers is the key to work on these diseases.
Thank you. Ms. Padmini, your focus is on helping women in their fertility journeys through technology. Your firm uses AI, data science, and behavioral science to offer personalized support and guidance. So how can technology drive effective behavioral changes? Could you share your insights from the perspective of your firm, Mind and Mom?
Thank you, Nirmal. First of all, thank you for the week and you for taking me here to Delhi because it's the first time I'm in Delhi for work. Before this, like any South Indian tourist, I came here to see Taj Mahal, so I'm happy being here. So when it comes to technology, I think the women health issues or the things that we got to do for women health is been there. Like for example, I'm not the first person working on women health in India. People been doing, like hospitals, doctors, been doing it for hundreds and hundreds of years. But what I am trying to do with technology here is bring in the transparency, make it work more for the women of today. How can I bring those choices to her? For example, in our startup, we emphasize and focus a little more on egg freezing, which is little new to the era, and we make it more affordable also for women in their middle class or early career to freeze eggs, because that's when you got to freeze eggs, not when I'm making a lot of money and in my 40s. So we make it more affordable with the help of technology, because with technology you can choose the right eggs, and with AI we can choose the right solution for her depending upon her age and her health and all that together, not just freezing eggs, also with IVF. When it comes to fertility treatment, whenever I was working in technology for fertility treatment, people been always saying that India is full of people. We are already like number one when it comes to population, Padmini. Why you want to work on something like fertility? But I think as a country, India's biggest strength is also population. Probably a little bit of a downside is also population. But having that very young Indians working on real ideas is very, very important for us. And the problem when it is at home is a very serious problem. So with AI and with technology, we make or fast track the whole process of, okay, 3 months I will wait for IUI and then go for IVF and then wait for 1 year. All that a much lower scale and make it much more successful. You don't have to have a failure in IVFs, instead have a success in a very quick rate. So that's what we work on.
Thank you. So, Mr. Sen, next question is to you. So today's world is a connected and smart world powered by Internet of Things. And IoT has integrated into everything from kitchens to our bodies. So your firm uses IoT for early heart disease detection. So how crucial is continuous remote monitoring systems is in a country like India, where there are major gaps in healthcare infrastructure and health equity?
See, IoT is a technology base for many things. And India has the advantage of having one of the lowest communication costs today. That brings the IoT very affordable. So any IoT device can run on a very high bandwidth at a low cost in India. And that can bring in any kinds of data or image transmission, what is required for a medical diagnosis, much faster, much easier, and much cheaper way. Now, if you see, the whole problem of equity in healthcare delivery is a problem which we tried solving in different way. Big guys go ahead, put hospitals of thousands of beds, 10,000s of beds. Now 10,000 bed probably is the minimum benchmark. Below that you are not a hospital, right? So even then, 10,000 and 1.4 billion, right? How much you can bridge? And how much specialists you have? You have 1.4 billion population. You have practicing cardiologists as on date probably 15,000. So there's a huge gap. Now if you see, what is the problem that happens with health is that when you have a major disease, and if you have a economic strata at a not very high end, the whole family is ruined, right? In one person suffers and the family is gone. With one disease getting cured, probably the guy is cured, but everything is gone. Because most of the time, the diagnosis happens at a very late stage. So you can't do much. So early diagnosis is a very important thing. And early diagnosis in a cardiac or cardiovascular domain, only way you can do it if you have a remote support. Because you can't get this 15,000 cardiologists to 1.4 billion population face to face, right? So that's our whole idea, to get the things. And we did this for a very long time, and IoT has become much more affordable, much more easily accessible today. You go to the remotest corner of India today, you will find a small office of India Post, and that place also will have internet connectivity for sure, if not anything else. Earlier days, people used to say you get a bottle of a soft drink and some sticks around, which was the highest penetration. Probably internet has gone much beyond that. So IoT is there to be there, and IoT will play a very strong role in early screening, early diagnosis, and also for expert second opinion. And that's the way of life for clinical. Only thing we should not get bogged with that, we are not solving a technology problem, we are solving a clinical problem. So many of us engineers, technologists, we get heavily sided on one side. Okay, we've solved this technology problem. I can transfer 1 gigabyte data in 0.01 second. But what you do with that 1 gigabyte data, that's very important.
Thank you. Dr. Karthik, so you were former CEO of the prestigious Indian Association of Cardiovascular Thoracic Surgeons. And your firm, Cardiobionic, recently created an artificial heart, which is currently at the animal trial stage. You also work for the Abu Dhabi royal family. So I wish to hear from you, what challenges do Indian health tech firms face while they take their innovations to the global stage?
Sure. First of all, I want to give a big thank you to the Week team for having me here. I just flew in from UAE, and my special thanks to His Excellency Sheikh Hassan bin Tana Al Nahyan and our Dr. Hidamet Hospitals, which is a maxillofacial plastic surgery chain of hospitals in Bangalore. A very interesting question, and I'm just coming at the conclusion of the Middle East or UAE Healthcare Conference, which concluded yesterday. It was a 3-day event. Interestingly, if I take a comparison of how other countries do it and try to answer your question, UAE has a very interesting Vision 2030, right? They started as Vision 2021, then they extended it by 10 years. Now they talk about Area 2071, where the focus is how can United Arab Emirates be the #1 country in several domains and several industries? So how can it be at the forefront, especially of healthcare, medtech? In fact, UAE is one of the few countries which has a ministry for artificial intelligence. There's so much talk of AI here. And ministry for values, because you're also talking about ethical and responsible AI. Now, how is all connected to the question of taking Indian products? So my healthcare journey in my 25 years career started 10 years back when I moved from consulting banking, driving the fintech program for Standard Chartered Bank. I moved to healthcare. And as you rightly said, I also was the CEO of the first non-medical CEO, but of course I have 5 doctorates, including the likes of BITS Pilani, XLRI Jamshedpur, and in the space of health tech. Going through this journey, moving from a non-healthcare to healthcare over the decade, if I look at the current poise of this medtech market, it has a potential of almost $10 to $11 billion as we speak. In the next 5 years, it can scale to 2030. But just like a flight which is in transit between continents, an intercontinental flight, you have headwinds and tailwinds. There are great programs in India like the MedTech Mitra. So last week I was, I had a meeting with Niti Aayog, respected Dr. V.K. Paul, and we were talking about Cardiobionic, which is going to be the world's most affordable heart. So this is one of the initiatives which we are doing in partnership with the UAE government and the Indian government. Interestingly, this product was developed in Australia by 2 cardiac surgeons, cardiothoracic surgeons, Dr. K.V. Balakrishnan, who is basically a heart-lung transplant surgeon. And over a dinner table on a piece of dinner napkin, they just drew out how can an artificial pump which simulates LVAD, RVAD function in case of acute heart failure, how can it basically be created, right? Now, to create such a device in a developed nation like Australia, which gives you around 40% of rebate when you do R&D projects, is a great thing. Compare it with the Indian ecosystem. I'm still from India. I live in UAE, I live in Dubai, but I greatly appreciate, my education has been from the IITs here, IIMs here. But the point is, are we providing sufficient wherewithal to the startups, to the entrepreneurs, to give them a kind of a springboard where they can quickly find the funding for what they want to do? So today, for example, Cardiobionic is trying to reduce the cost of an artificial heart, which costs in the US by Abbott, our nearest competitor. It costs almost 90 lakhs to 1 crore. We're trying to bring down that cost to 12 to 15 lakhs, right? Animal trials are going on. 2 weeks back, we concluded in Hyderabad. And I must compliment that Indian regulatory environment, like I said, MedTech Mitra, provides great hand-holding for you to do end-to-end regulatory compliance, trials, all of these things. But then when I want to kind of export this abroad, the biggest challenge today MedTech industry in India, in my humble opinion, is facing is some of the changes in the policy of import-export. We import a lot of refurbished, used medical equipment, and we are bringing it back to kind of becoming a collection space in India for. So where is the space similarly for us to export World Tech? Now today I'm also a professor in Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, and triple ITs. I see that in these incubators, if you take IIT Madras, they are a $40 billion incubator. They have a separate medtech incubator which comes out with state-of-the-art devices, assisted services when it comes to healthcare. There's a lot of funding, no doubt about it. But once you develop a prototype to a MVP, a minimum viable prototype, and you want to take it to market, how are the government regulations facilitating that? If I have to do it with UAE, for example, and I'll conclude with this, the answer to the question in the interest of time, it is very easy because the government has given us placeholders in UAE to welcome such initiatives because they see it as an opportunity for them to be at the forefront of healthcare along with India. So we need a little bit of relook, as I said, into the import-export policies of India. It's great to have a MedTech Mitra kind of initiatives thanks to Niti Aayog and ICMR. But we need to see more of this, right? We talk about AMTZ and few other MedTech incubators which are bringing global expertise to India, right? But what about the reverse, as you rightly said? I think we have a lot of ground to cover in that area.
This is one question I wanted to ask each one of you. Thank you, Dr. Karthik, for bringing that into notice. So, is India's current health tech regulatory framework adequate and helpful, or is it holding back entrepreneurs? What changes would you like to see? I'll start with Venkat.
No, okay. So one thing I started the discussion with rare diseases, right? So I'll just continue on that same line. Also, one of the things that I would like to see change over time is that rare diseases typically, like finally the numbers that are there, the number of patients that we need to do clinical trials on are already very limited, and there is a huge unmet need. And so in the West, there has typically been a lot of trials of N of 1 trials. What they essentially mean is you prove it on one patient and you already get the approvals to try it on more. Instead of trying to say that we need a trial with randomized controlled trials with a few hundred people and so on, which is not very feasible with the this one. And going forward, I think most of them alluded to that one, where we are going to get into personalized therapies and so on. Rare disease is the stepping stone. Once you solve this problem, getting into personalized therapies is going to be much easier. But allowing such trials and ensuring that it reaches the patient much faster, as in one is the time, the other is the trial itself. Being allowed, these are two things that I would like to see as big changes that we would need going forward in the journey for clinical trial, regulatory perspective.
Mr. Sen, we would like to hear from you.
From a devices perspective or equipment perspective, earlier we didn't have any framework. So that's a bigger problem. Now at least one framework exists. And that helps the Indian companies to go outside and say, okay, this is approved by country. Country regulation has approved it. Obviously at a very nation stage. It has to go a long way to get to a Central European standard or a North American standard. It's a long way to go. But at least there is a beginning. That's very important because earlier there was no framework, nothing. Anybody can make anything and sell. That was the situation. Now, as we in HeartNet, as we progress with our IoT console Asan, we see interest from other countries in Southeast Asia and says, okay, now that you have your own regulatory approval, why don't you take our approvals also and do here partnership? That's the positive part of it. Now coming to the points what is talking of is that, okay, now the regulation has to do a fast forward because we have entered with the regulations thing much later than the whole world, right? So we have to move much faster. We can't say that, okay, China took 15 years to get the SFDA streamlined. We will also take 15 years. We have to do it in 15 months. So that's the speed what we need for the go-to-market activities right now. And I think direction is right. A lot of learning has come from organization like CE and FDS of the world, and that is being implemented. But clinical trial and trial of equipment and devices, only problem today in India is that it's all clubbed under the same head. That's one critical thing. So if I have to do a trial of a drug, say phase 2 or phase 3, or if I have to do a simple trial of a phototherapy equipment, which is nothing, okay? Both will go through similar regulation almost, which is little fuzzy. So classification of the devices and classification of the drugs and getting that segregated out in under 2 heads probably one way to go, which will make it faster also. And some more clear guidelines, like what for what. That's probably emerging, but it need to go faster.
Padmini, would you like to add something?
So, rules are always good. We always think rules are against us, we got to break the rules. But the framework or whatever we call as the basic system is very good. So it keeps things in place, and it's not like what Sir was mentioning. We have some framework to show it to the other part of the world that, see, it's approved in India. All that it is a little bit or a lot of speed. In a startup, especially I come from a startup space, time is everything. I have raised funds for the next 12 months to do certain things, and I can't be waiting for the approval for 18 months. I'm like already out of the business. I'm not even an R&D business. I am like in a proper healthcare business where I have to show revenue, I have to show profit. Now, there are certain things that's not in my control, and I'm like waiting there, and I have no idea where is this coming from. So if we have a system and speed, I think we will do really well with the framework that we have now.
So we are moving to the third round. So here the same question will be to all 4 of you. So first we will go to Dr. Karthik. So what major changes do you expect in the health domains that you are focused on? And also, could you please share some advices for budding entrepreneurs who wish to come to health tech?
So I would like to give you a strategy which I call as break the ice strategy, right? And let me play with the acronym of ICE. ICE, I is actually not a single I, but it's 3 I. It is to ideate, it is to innovate, and it's to incubate. So as a startup, we must have a very rapid and agile way of whether it is clinical trials, whether it is testing out devices, whether it is looking at the latest and greatest of health tech and applicability to our industry. Is there a way to quickly move from idea to innovation to incubation? And we have the necessary ecosystems, as I said, in the IITs. There's a lot of partnership from private equity companies, family offices. I work for a family office abroad, but in India, you have so many family offices. So use the ecosystem, power of the ecosystem in the first try. The second C, I think, which is missing, and a major change which is required, C for change, is to change the quotient of collaboration. What do I mean by this? There should be greater collaboration from proactive steps from the government, right? Like today, we are trying to bring cardiobionic from Australia to India. It's a very different problem from, let's say, Dr. Hiremat Hospital setting up 9 maxillofacial surgery or plastic surgery or cleft repair clinics, which is much easier because you're offering a service versus you're trying to bring a product from abroad to, you're trying to import it to India and make it adaptable to the Indian ecosystem. So the C is the collaboration from the government side, which I said we are saying to MedTech Mitra, but we need to see greater number of grants, like you have BIRAC, you have ICMR grants, but these are not sufficient. So the level of investment from the government should be greater. E, I would say, finally, the change which is needed is equity in an equitable way. What do I mean by this? That there are companies which, as part of their corporate social responsibilities today, are willing to facilitate startups. And this is again how most of the incubators work. They work as Section 8 companies. You go to any IIT, you go to ISC Medical Foundation. Now I was with the director of, CEO of Bakshi Parthasarathi Hospital, ISC, which is being set up by the ISC Medical Foundation. It's a Section 8 company. Where did 800,000 crores for this come? It came from the founders of Mindtree, Subroto Bagachi and Parthasarathi, right? So we need more of this investment from the private sector, not just as corporate social responsibility, but it should be a give and take where the startup receives the money and in return they are going to get equity. Today, the traditional model is you go to private equity companies. Now, I've worked with 2 large US private equity companies in my life, in healthcare also, last one being New Mountain Capital. The problem with private equity is you get into the numbers game. You're always looking at valuation, you're looking at scaling, your revenue from X to 4X to 5X, and you're looking at exit. You're not looking at innovating, you're not looking at scaling your product or taking it to market and making it sustainable in that area, right? So therefore, the E is the most important thing, that in an equitable way, we have to create equity beyond the private equity space through collaboration. Thank you so much.
Mr. Venkat?
I think that was a good from a different perspective. So I looked at it. I looked at your question from a technology perspective, saying that where do you think the field is heading and so on. And when I look at it, the last say 10 years or I would say less than that, AI, the way it has changed the world, as in like what we are about to expect every year is changing. Yeah. And the same thing is happening when AI meets healthcare. Yeah. As you said, some of these points saying that right AI helping right from clinical trials to drug discovery, all of it is happening in the whole continuum of this one. And over time in the next, so anybody predicting beyond 3 or 4 years now is getting impossible because of the way the technology is changing. But we know that the general trend towards in the fields that we are working on is we are going to get more and more, we are going to solve some of the more tougher problems that weren't solved for decades for now, number one. And we are going to get more personalized medicine coming to each one of us sooner than later.
Mr. Sen?
I think one thing of all of us who directly deal with the patient and the healthcare delivery, we have to be a little skeptical about using technology always. As we said, we are not solving a technology problem, we are solving a clinical problem. As we were talking in the morning, if you do exit poll and put a huge AI around that, and if it fails, it's fine, right? Nothing too much bad. But if I put an AI in my cardiac screening algorithm and it fails, even if 1% fails, yeah, that's critical. So what we do on trying to put this technology, one thing we have to be very clear that probably false positive is better than the false negative. That we have to be very, very careful, especially for diagnosis and treatment when you're going for. I'll rather live with the false positive and get the patient to do one more test to confirm or reconfirm rather than send him happily home and say he has a heart attack after 2 days. So that we have to be careful. Second thing, I think we are still quite away from handing over the complete diagnosis screening on technology tools. We still have miles to go. What we do in our platforms in HeartNet is that we do have enough tools to probably do a predictive diagnosis to the level of 99.5% accuracy. But every case of us finally lands in a cardiologist lab. It goes with a screening marked, okay, here is the problem, here is the problem, here is the problem. Doctor, now tell what you feel. That's where we stand today. We internally have a lot of doubt because that's a lot of expense, right? Every case goes to a cardiologist, he sees it, he consults it. Should we take 50% of the pure normal out of the cardiologist and say it is normal, doesn't have to go to cardiologist? Still debating on that. So use of technology, what has happened? Other thing what has happened is that it has made the things faster. Without these tools, if a cardiologist would have taken 5 minutes to do a case, now he takes probably about 1 minute or 2 minutes. That's the advantage what I see at this moment. But taking cardiologist off and handing over to the tool, probably I'm still not confident. We are there. Some more data points, probably 1 billion data respectively is required. And in healthcare domain, one critical thing we forget sometimes, the demography where from the data is collected and demography where the data is applied. There's quite difference. So you can't use a Caucasian data model to train a tool which is going to be used on a South Asian demographics. That will be dangerous. So you have to be careful on where we apply technology and where you should be careful about.
Now, Padmini, could you please add?
So I come from a technology background. I was checking somebody's code for so many years and then got into entrepreneurship and got into healthcare. To me, one thing that's very clear is do not use technology for the sake of it. Just because I know AI, just because I can code, just because I have this model available, I don't want to be using it, right? But it should technically add value or add something extra in somebody's life, make somebody's life much better than how it was, then it makes so much sense. And also another part of your question is, what do we say for the young entrepreneurs or upcoming entrepreneurs in this space, right? I think there are quite a lot of problems in health tech that we can deal with. I mean, there are quite a lot of segments just in women health itself, but also in general health, in pediatric space, in cardiac space, in intervention radiology space. There are quite a lot which is not explored at all. I think if people like he was mentioning about IIT Madras and their incubation centers, where I think new ideas about new segments, I think doctors should join hands with tech entrepreneurs and bring in more and more ideas. There should be a lot of collaborations happening between doctors and the entrepreneurs where the real magic would happen is what I think.
So thank you all for sharing your valuable insights. We look forward to seeing how Indian health tech evolves. And as a media house, we offer our full support for that journey. I request a round of applause for all our panelists. And thank you once again for joining today.